All right. So I think a lot of you I've been promoting the heck out of this thing out there because I feel like this is a really important time. And again, this is a piece of history here, and you get to hear from a guy that was there. And so let's just jump in, Pop. I want to know, can you tell us what you worked on for Apollo 11 and your role in the firing room and that unforgettable launch day of July 16th, 1969, which is 50 years ago yesterday.
At exactly 9:32 a.m. in the
Ah,
morning. Yes, all of us were in the firing room. There was about 500 of us with the VIPs and so forth. And my role was with the McDonnell Douglas team that had built the third stage. My company had built the third stage on the mighty Saturn V rocket that had to have a restartable engine. And there were two models of that S4B stage, one for the two-stage vehicle, which did not have a restartable J2 engine, but the one that we had to use did have to restart to get them to the moon. Sitting in the firing room that morning, I came in very, very early. It was still dark, and for that particular launch to get started, we have a procedure that is a I think it's about almost 2 or 3 feet high of what we use for getting all the systems up and running, for loading the propellants and everything. And that's what we follow step by step. And there's a leader in our firing room called a test conductor, and he's with he's a NASA person, and he's a legend now in his own time, Norm Carlson. He's passed away now, but anyway, he would follow the procedure, and we would, when he would make a call out to our particular call sign, each and all of us that were working in the firing room that had a call sign, we would be requested by him, and he would call our name, and we would answer and respond in a like manner. If he said, "Turn this on," you would say, "This is," and I'm going to use my position at that time, C4IP. Transmitter on. I said C4IP. This is C4IP. Transmitter is on. You flip a switch on the panel. You look for a talkback to make sure that that particular system came on. But anyway, all of us were in there. We were focused, very focused on this, because this was the biggest event in our history up to this time. And we were in a race. There's a lot of debate about whether we were in a race or not in a race. We were in a race. It finally came out later that the Russians admitted that we were in a race. And there's an article about the deniers that said we never went and so forth. And that's a good article to read. We sent it to you. But the main thing was that, hey, we were on our way to the moon. And it was a very pensive time here in Florida. But there were people all over the world that were cranked up for this, tracking stations, ships, aircraft, area they called them, all over the world waiting for this mission to go off. So there was literally thousands of people. There was actually 400,000 of us that what I want to call the Apollo launch team, the Apollo team, and a subset of that was the launch team, which was us down here in Florida. And the 400,000, maybe some 20,000 companies, I've heard that number before, built all of the parts, and I'm happy to say they were built in the good old USA. We didn't have this globalization stuff at that time. It was all America, made in America, the whole vehicle, every part, down to the piece part, transistor, whatever. We didn't have chips back then. But anyway, getting on down the road, the subset of that 400,000 was the launch team here in Florida that comprised about 25,000 people. Some people say it got up to about 30,000 during that time, and possibly so. But anyway, a huge amount of people here to do this task. Our task here at Florida was to receive the vehicles, the parts, the major parts that were built somewhere else in our country. And like I said, we were the third stage of the massive Saturn V. There was one other little part called the IU that was right on top of us, a little 3-foot ring that contained what they used to call the brains of the Saturn V. It had the digital computer that would control us and put us in that point in space where we were supposed to be, and also get us started to the moon. But anyway, these parts came in. We received them all here, either by barge or by airplane. Our stage came in on a pregnant guppy, a modified C-97. It was a mammoth that you could stuff something about 23 feet in diameter into. And so the parts, the two major first stage, second stage were barged in because they were so large, 33 feet in diameter, and ours was flown in. We accepted these vehicles. Our job was to accept them, receive them, check them out. When we say check out, and to launch. The checkout was our job. When those major pieces came in, our job was to learn everything we could about our systems that we were going to be responsible for. And there were many, many systems and subsystems of those systems. And we had to learn those systems, as well as the people that designed them are very close to it, and all of the specifications that were used to design those systems, and write a procedure that would either say go or no go on each and every item in that entire system. And it all had to work. That was our job, to verify that this thing would work and all of our systems would work, and not only on our stage, but all of the stages. Everybody was doing the same thing, checking it out and getting prepared for this historic event. Now, we had had a couple of Saturn V launches, before this, and so we had established the confidence that our testing had done there, and our checkout and launching capabilities that had been tested with 3 or 4 Saturn V's. So this was not a new rodeo, so to speak, but this particular one that we had all worked toward for the last almost 8 years. This was the grand finale. And let me tell you, there was a lot of sweat, blood, tears, and divorces as a result of what was going on out here. There was a lot of sacrifice made in a lot of families. But eventually you're at that moment. And the moment is 3, 2, 1, firing command has been given. The firing command is given because those mighty F1 engines, 1.5 million pounds of thrust each, a total of 7.5 million pounds at what we call sea level thrust, and ingesting 30,000 pounds of propellant per second. And when those engines light, and it takes almost 9 seconds. The engine start command is started 8.9 seconds before liftoff. That allows time for those F1 engines to build up thrust to what we call main stage. It's 90%. There's pressure switches that say, hey, you're there, cut it loose. All 5 engines are going. At that particular moment, you see the belching fire and the smoke coming out. And as you've seen on TV, we didn't get to see much of that in the firing room there unless we stood up and turned out we could see the thing going up. But anyway, when those swing arms, when you saw the umbilicals pop out of each stage, and there are 9 swing arms, as soon as those umbilicals popped out, it's over for us. There's nothing more we can do. We have no control whatsoever. Well, who is controlling it between the time that the hold down arms are released and the time it clears the tire? Well, it's kind of a gray area there because nobody's ever said we have it. The agency that said we have it as soon as you clear the tower is Houston. And you will hear them on many of the videos say, we have it, it just cleared the tower. And they do have it. And they have it from that point on all the way to splashdown in the ocean after the mission is accomplished. It's all mission control Houston. and they did a very, very fine job for all of the missions. And I was fortunate enough to be there as part of the S4B team, and the 500 people in the firing room and the 400,000 people parts of the team. We in the firing room, we got a lot more publicity than the other people that are out. There's thousands of people all over the complex doing various jobs. The whole team. It's not just us in the firing room. We're getting the publicity and so forth, because who all's in that firing room? All these dignitaries, officials. Werner von Braun, that was a grandfather of the rocket. Kurt Davis, who was a grandfather of Complex 39, for creating what they call a mobile concept, which was really quick. I'll hit that. The mobile concept. What was a mobile concept? We had a mobile launcher. They built a huge building. Most of the rockets here at the Space Center that I worked on with Douglas Company back in the early days, you took the rocket out to the pad, and that's where you checked it out, set it up, and launched it. You're out there at the behest of the weather, the salt spray, storms, hurricanes. So this mobile concept was, let's build a building, prepare the vehicle inside the building, where we don't have to worry about weather and hurricanes and the corrosive atmosphere that we have down here in Cape Canaveral. And then you check it out, make sure almost everything's working. Then you roll it out to the pad, which was 3.5 miles away. Well, why was it 3.5 miles away? Well, if somebody ever put a compass out there and swung a circle around, you get about a 7-mile diameter circle. And what that 7-mile diameter circle was, that somebody had put together some numbers that if you ever had one of those things blowing up on the pad, the Saturn V, with the energy that was stored in the tanks, you would have the equivalent of about 2,000 pounds of tons of TNT going off at one time. Which was only about 1/10 of the Hiroshima bomb, but tremendous blast. Hence the 3.5 miles back, half of the diameter. And not only that, but louvers in front of the windows, so that if there was a blast, you could shut the louvers and prevent the glass from caving in the Launch Control Center. Never happened. Never. As a matter of fact, yesterday when we were all out there, the surviving members, it was a tremendous event yesterday. Those louvers have been removed from all the way across the firing room that they used to open and close on occasion. But they never really needed them and never really used them, because the big shots up on the top row up there, I say the big shots, the top people up there, they had a beautiful view, and they never wanted them closed. But anyway, that was our job, to receive, check out, and launch. Swing arms come away, it's over, we go home and watch it with everybody else. And what you've started there is you've started an 8-day countdown, because everything that went on from that point on, we'd already proven that we could get to the moon, that the lunar module could go down within 50,000 feet of the moon on Apollo 10. But those guys had to come back. So we had already gone that far, and we had pretty good confidence. But actually landing on the moon and getting back, those risks were very dangerous risks. Had not been proven. And so this was the first for that. And so watching, and I tell people this when I'm volunteering out at the Space Center at the Saturn V Museum a few times a month for the last 8 years. I tell people that were 2 historic moments of this thing. One of them was launching it, getting it off the pad, getting them on their way. And that particular moment, we really united our entire nation here, the United States of America. We had a raging war going on in Vietnam. Like I said, we were competing with that. But for that moment in time, everybody forgot about the Vietnam War and all the other things that were going on in our country. And it was just focused. Our country was focused. We had full support. We were united as one in the country at that particular time, 50 years ago. the second phase of the historic moment is 4 days later when they're getting ready to walk on the moon. They've landed on the moon and they're getting ready to come down that ladder, Armstrong. And as he came down that ladder, the whole world now was watching. And I do get some dust in the room when I think about it, but the whole world was watching, and we were united. The whole world was at that one moment in time. And I tell people, I said, I don't think that moment in time will ever be repeated. I don't care what the situation is, the whole world being united at that moment. And I still believe it to this day, and it's me talking, so it's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. But that was the most fantastic thing that had ever happened, and in my point of view, the greatest achievement ever. Nobody's topped it yet. That doesn't mean there's no countries out there getting ready, to compete with us and do something like that. The Chinese have done something wonderful. They've landed something on the opposite side of the moon, a very complex spacecraft. So these other nations we're competing with them now. So we did win that race. We won that race 50 years ago. There was a race. It was a race against Russia. They had already made us look pretty putrid as fools with their Sputnik and the first man to orbit the Earth over there. Those two amazing events, and we had lost a lot of prestige. Believe me, the Russians had really leaped before, way ahead of us in missile technology, because the Sputnik in October of 1957. Was launched on an ICBM, theirs. We did not have an ICBM. They could deliver a thermonuclear warhead right to New York City back in 1957. So we were in a race with them first to get our missile technology up to speed where we could compete with them and we would have an ICBM. And that finally happened in the early 60s. I divert a little bit here. But that was our first race with them, is trying to catch up with their missile technology. So we were behind. We were playing catch up. And I was working on a little Thor missile here in the 50s. We were trying to develop something that would go 1,300 nautical miles. So you would have to deploy the system to use it as a weapon system and get pretty close to your targets. But we were trying to catch up and get the ICBM. We finally did. But then when Yuri Gagarin, it was reported to Kennedy, he'd just been in office for 4 months. The technical advisor with NASA ran into his office and said, "Sir, guess what the Russians have done now? They've got a man orbiting the Earth, a human being named Yuri Gagarin." And Kennedy says, "Oh, wow. What do you think they're going to be doing next?" "Well, sir, we think they're preparing to go to the moon, and they're well on their way. They're preparing for the moon." And I'm ad-libbing a little bit, but I think this is about what was going on. His announcement right to those people were, "We got to beat them." And like I said, I'm playing on words here a little bit, but I think this is just about how it went. And he made the speech. We got the support of the Congress to fund it. The money started flowing. Werner von Braun had already been developing the Saturn vehicle. A lot of people don't realize this. Oh, it started as soon as Kennedy made, no. Werner von Braun was already building the first Saturn rocket back in the late 50s, and we launched it, I think, 4 or 5 months after Kennedy made that speech, without a second stage, of course. But that was the first Saturn V Block 1 without an upper stage that we launched. We launched 4 of those, and then my company, Douglas, had the contract to build an upper stage for that booster, called the S4, not the 4B, but the S4. Had 6 RL-10 engines on it at 15,000 pounds of thrust each. You had 90,000 pounds of thrust. The whole vehicle weighed more than that, but when you're in zero G, you don't need anything. You just, the thrust doesn't really mean that much as long as it's pushing. But anyway, then the follow-on contract was to build the S4B. You got rid of those RL-10s and you added a J2 engine developed by Rocketdyne, and Rocketdyne built all of the engines for the stack, for the first stage, second stage, and our stage, to propel the thing. And they worked very, very well. Rocketdyne was the engine guru of their time, from almost the very beginning of our missile technology. Rocketdyne, a subsidiary of North American Aviation, built all those engines and had developed them, had gone through the growing pains of some of them exploding and so forth, but they worked perfectly, and I'm very, very proud of Rocketdyne. But anyway, we made it. The vehicle performed flawlessly. The mission was accomplished. They got back. Armstrong and Aldrin got back to the command module, the mother craft, you might say, and joined the lonesome hero that was out here yesterday talking to us, Michael Collins. He's 80, I think about 88 years old now, but he's still very, very sharp. And they came home, they splashed down, and at the moment that they were dropped on the deck of the Hornet, the mission was over and they were safe. And then we went 5 more times to the moon, and everybody, it became routine and so forth. So that one mission, the Apollo 11, which the 50th anniversary was yesterday, will be the most outstanding of all of the missions that we had to the moon, and rightfully so. But we picked up a lot of knowledge from those missions, and the American people are enjoying thousands of spin-offs from the technology that was gleaned in a very short period of time. That and people don't even know. They pick up something, say electronic device or a skillet with Teflon coatings or all these coatings, all spin-offs. But NASA was never allowed to publicize and publish stuff like that. But they used to put out a magazine about every 2 or 3 months. It would be almost a half-inch thick. It would be NASA spin-offs, and they were coming out. So there were just literally thousands of things being produced. And even in the medical profession, where you would have to maybe wait 2 or 3 weeks for a blood test. Well, they couldn't wait 2 or 3 weeks for these astronauts when they would take their blood test, because they want to know they're perfectly healthy. They want to know in a day or two. So you can get a blood test and almost immediately the next day get the results of it. That was a spinoff. One of them, many medical things have spun out of that. But anyway, what I tried to do is cover the first of it. I know our broadcast back a couple of years ago, I rambled for almost 3 hours. We're not going to do that today, I know. But let me stop there and start. And you give me some other questions and so forth that I can start with. But I hope that I have laid the groundwork for kind of what we were doing down here and what I did and what our company did and what the whole 400,000 did.
Absolutely, Pop. That was amazing. I didn't even want to interrupt you, so I was just gleaning, and there's a lot of comments in the chat of people just saying the same thing. Like, this is amazing. Like, just to hear from you and hear your story of being there and seeing this with your own eyes. I've been watching that Armstrong movie that I didn't even know. It seemed like they just pushed it out like during this week, this historic week.
They did.
And, John Shepley said Jim is fabulous. So that's really neat. That's nice.
Thank you.
Comments coming through. So what I learned actually from watching that, and also the Apollo 11 documentary that came out too, that I can't believe what they were able to do with that footage. The actual footage, like, it looks better than movies that were made in the 90s or on a Blu-ray. I can't believe they were able to do that, but they were able to take this original footage, and I've learned a lot by watching this stuff in preparation for our time today. And I was dumbfounded, mind blown, just to think about that this vehicle, this rocket that you were a part of building and testing and making sure it would work, weighed 6.5 million pounds. 6.5 million. I can't even imagine.
Yes.
I can't compare that to anything.
And to get it off to get it off the pad, you obviously had to have a lot more than
A lot more
6.5 to get it accelerating off, which was 7.5, a million pounds more
That's
of thrust than the weight of the whole vehicle. You're right. Go
yeah.
ahead.
That's what I learned. I was like, what? So you have to have the like you said, you got to have even more thrust.
That's
So when
right.
I was watching the Armstrong movie, which is really, I'm halfway through. It's incredible on iTunes. It's like $12.99 to buy it, or you can rent it. His wife is in there. Neil Armstrong's no longer with us, but his wife and his kids, his sons, were a part of this and being interviewed. And I just remember his wife saying, like, we were all watching, and this rocket lift off, and there's so much smoke, and this thing is going so slow to
That's
lift
right.
off. She's like, where did it go? Where is it? Everyone's like, and like you said, you got to start the countdown. You got to start the boosters 8 seconds at T-8, just to even like get close to movement at 0, right?
That's right. To get it for those engines to build up that
Yeah.
7.5 million, it takes about almost 9 seconds. You're absolutely right, and it takes off very, very slow. It takes about 12
Yeah.
seconds for it to get going and to clear the 400 some foot tower there before Houston says we have it.
Yeah.
But it's when you see that, and most people weren't born yet, even on your show, but what they have seen is they've seen video, and there is video, tons and tons of video. And that's what I would recommend to the deniers, the handful that are down in the white noise area that said we never did it. And I think there may be the heirs of the original deniers that may have passed on now that said you never did it, we did it. And there's so much footage out there. I was watching something last night, and it was several of the missions. There's literally hours and hours and hours of footage on the moon. We spent 300 hours. I've looked up some of the statistics. We spent 300 hours on the moon. 81 of those hours were exploration by the crew. There is, and there's just so much footage that the deniers they ought to watch every single minute of it. But what I wanted to emphasize about that particular movie, your mom and I went. We finally, I was not going to go see First Man because of the intentional deletion of the American flag being planted on the moon. Big political thing that they made at that movie. We wanted to concentrate on Armstrong. And none of us here that launched it, we were going to abstain, and we weren't. But I finally said, if I wanted to be a critic of that movie, I better go rent it or buy it or something. And so we went to try and see it. Couldn't see it. We found a copy, and BJ's looked at it, and so we saw the Hollywood version. And they do not treat Buzz Aldrin, who in my opinion is still a hero, as a blowhard and so forth. They really treated him in a very disparaging manner. But the emphasis here again, they said, was on the movie and not on our country, and not on our flag. And so, okay, but let me tell you what I liked about this Armstrong movie. There's no Hollywood involved here. So none of their windage or skewing or revising, comments or history. They can't do it here. It's all real. That's what I love about this particular version, the Armstrong version. It's not even out for release until September, I think, but you can get it for $12.99. We own it. You can download it, watch it many times. All the players are real and people that have survived, including Armstrong's wife, who is in their major role, and his 2 sons that have grown up now. But also there are many of the old astronauts commenting all through there. Christopher Kraft, who was the main man in mission control at that time, head of the mission control room. All of these people that have contributed to that, and is such a I highly recommend it. I do not recommend First Man as a viewer, but I highly recommend that one. The Apollo 11 was the other one. There no Hollywood windage in that one either. as it happened. And so, like you said, some of the audio and visuals in that it's almost high definition. You can't believe what it was, and that was 50 years ago. Here again,
Yeah,
enough
it's
said on
incredible.
that. Go.
Dad, what was going through your mind when the countdown started?
What you're going through in the countdown, you've got this massive countdown manual in front of you, and where all of your call outs are, your call signs are, you've highlighted them so that you're going page by page and you're following step by step, and it goes on for hours there because the countdowns are quite lengthy. But after you get the juice in there, I say the propellants are loaded and so forth just a few hours before launch. It's all of your whole body. You don't want to miss it. You miss a call out, you are in trouble. So every single person that had a countdown manual in front of them that had functions that they had to perform when the test conductor called CLTC, that was his call sign, Norm Carlson, would call out that specific thing and read the words for it, and that was your call. You better be prepared right as he says that to respond to him in like kind and let him know that you have done whatever function he has asked you. So for several, the countdowns are very lengthy, and that's what we're all doing. We are all concentrating on that. Everybody has highlighted there. You flip a page. Oh, there I am. Be ready. So that's what you had to focus on. And we all did, and every launch you had to. It was intense, but once you got down to the 8.9 seconds, and actually before that, there's a thing called an automatic countdown sequencer, because there were so many functions that had to be done manually that would have to have been done manually that the computer could do very quickly, even though the computer, I don't think, had 33K of memory in it back then and everything, but it did it very well. The 3 minutes and 7 seconds, I think we switched to the automatic countdown sequencer. So your panel was locked out. There was nothing more that you could do. You could sit there and flip switches and do, but the computer was in control. All the switches and everything, with the exception of the vital emergency functions that were on the propulsion panels, where they had lever lock switches. There were hard wires all the way to the pad, that if you had an emergency situation and you had to open the LOX tank vent or the LH2 vent, there were, I don't know, several functions, and they were right there, and they were hardwired, and they were always activated. You could activate them at any time. Computer had nothing to do with them, so they couldn't do it. And these were safety features, and they were on a lot of panels where if you had to safe the vehicle. But anyway, at about 3 minutes, the computer takes over, and as everything is going, and there's lights flashing on your panel where they're turning this on, turning that off, whatever. And so you just sit there and watch, and until liftoff. But it's the last 3 minutes of where you could hear a pin drop in that firing room on that particular day. And then when the engine's lit and everything, I'm telling you, the euphoria, we were standing up, shouting, screaming, clapping. It was anybody that's listening that was there, they would know what it was like. And so that's my story. It was exhilarating. I've looked in the dictionary for words to describe that feeling on that particular day and that particular. I can't find words. I looked up euphoria. I looked up exhilaration. I've looked for other words, magnanimous. What I finally came up with was a formula for my feelings, and I think most people, but for me, it was take euphoria and take exhilaration and multiply them together and get the product and take it to the 10th power. I think that's just about the feeling, because I've never experienced that feeling in my life since that we had there at that particular moment in the firing room. And I'm telling you, not only us, but the 400,000 people that helped this, that made this program happen.
So that's incredibly moving, Dad. And I agree with you. I mean, there's we haven't seen anything like this since. And I mean, just the fact that 50 years ago, 400,000 people, you being one of them, were able to send this, like we said, 6 million-pound rocket, and with three human beings on it,
Yes.
to space. Not only get them into space, which is an incredible accomplishment, but figure out how to get them all the way to the moon, get them to walk on the moon. You know, it's and just bring them back safely. Like, it's just an incredible. You only get one chance to do this once.
That's right.
I mean, and so I just can't even imagine all of the research, all of the thinking that went into this. And like you said, this isn't just something that happened in a year. Like, this was like nearly 2 decades in the making, right?
Oh yeah.
Starting with missiles.
Well, we started with missiles, and
Yeah.
something that's very unique in my life, that I'm kind of proud of is I was living here in Brevard County, and it just so happened that my parents we were living out on South Merritt Island, and I had the Banana River in my front yard and the Indian River in my backyard, South Merritt Island, renting a property down there for almost 3 years. But in 1950, school was out. I was in the 8th grade. I went out in the Banana River and with my cast net, knee deep, to catch some mullet, and for bait, to catch this was the trout capital of the world back then. The waters were pristine, not anymore, but they were back then. And I'm walking there about between 9 and 10 in the morning, about 9:30 maybe, and I start hearing this crackling sound. And I'm looking around, and I look toward the Cape, and here is this this little contrail going up out there. And lo and behold, wow, what is that? And it was a V2 rocket with a Watt Corporal second stage, and it was Werner von Braun and his firing lab from Huntsville, Alabama, launching this V2 rocket there. And I'll never forget the time, the day, especially after my dad showed me in the paper what it was the next day. It was called Bumper 8. It was the last launch of what they call the Bumper program, where those German scientists and rocket people that we had obtained from World War II, with Werner von Braun being their leader, and thank God we got him, because they wanted to surrender to us because they knew what the Russians could possibly be doing. But anyway, that rocket lifted off, and it went straight up, and I don't know what the mission was or anything, and I don't even know if it completed it, but I don't think the staging occurred that they were looking for. But that was really the beginning. In July 24th of 1950. I think I was 12 years old, and it was summer break, and I was in the 8th grade at Cocoa High School. And in my opinion, when looking back at that, that's really the beginning of our rocket and space program. Was in July 24th, 1950, down here in Cape Canaveral. And I got to witness that. And there's not a heck of a lot of people that could say that they could say, hey, I witnessed that. And not only that, I spent 51 years working on the space program and rockets. How fortunate was I? How lucky was I? I don't even want to use the word. How blessed was I?
Yeah.
Tremendous. Almost a Cinderella life in rocketry. I was really blessed to be there at the right age, at the right time, and in the right place.
Yeah, and I'll add, with the right stuff.
And well, let's save the right stuff for those people that climb on those things. I don't know who invented that name, but brother, it is very appropriate, because for those people, the men and women that climb on the tip of those things and put their life in harm's way, and they do it every time. They have the right stuff. We did not have to put our lives in harm's way. Same thing about the greatest generation. I was saying for that for a moment. Uh, I don't believe everything that all of his politics, Tom Brokaw and so forth, but he wrote a book about the greatest generation. He established a name for those people that fought our wars and died 400,000, for World War II. But he kind of is responsible for that name. I think it's somebody who wrote the book, The Right Stuff. They're responsible for that name. And they stuck, and they're perfect. They're those expressions are perfect. And one of the ones that I want to say that, hey, I want to invent one. I want to call us the space generation. The biggest difference between the greatest generation is they had to put their lives on the line. We didn't have to put our lives on the line, but we are now, as Reagan said years ago, I think a lot of us are slipping the surly bounds of Earth and to meet our maker. And because we're approaching that age difference where we are losing greatest generations, and they're almost all gone now. They're in their 80s and 90s, who I have the greatest respect for. But secondly, we're the space generation. We're kind of going through the same thing, but they had to put their lives on the line and put their lives in harm's way, and we didn't. The people that did have to put their lives in harm's way are our astronauts. They sign up for that. They have the right stuff. And that's the new term.
Yeah, I appreciate that elaboration for sure. And I was just thinking, before we get to Q&A, there's a few questions that I'd love to ask you. But I just have a couple more. I guess one of the questions is, as we know, there were 400,000 human beings working on this project. And again, using the brain, a pencil, paper, and a slide rule, which blows my mind because I depend so much on Google now to remember stuff, like it's like my second brain. It's like, oh, I can't remember. I'll just Google that, so it's
That's right.
That alone is just mind blowing. And I don't know if we'll ever have another achievement like that, because we kind of have all this technology available to us and now we have AI and, a lot of the machines and the technology is doing the work for us, is doing a lot of the thinking for us. So I just don't know if we'll ever, even if we get to Mars, even if Elon Musk, gets to Mars on SpaceX, like, I don't think we'll ever have the same level of achievement that was accomplished, that you and the 999,000 others did 50 years ago. But I'm just thinking about alignment. There's a lot of us, and a lot of my audience, we're designers, and we're trying to make a difference using technology that's available to us today, using visual design and whatever medium that happens to be with. We're trying to make a difference there. And sometimes it's hard enough just to get like 20 people aligned to launch a mobile app or something, or our website. Like, and that's nobody's life is, for the most part, depending on that product. And I just want to know, like, how in the wide world of sports do you get 400,000 individuals working together with how many organizations, Dad? How many various organizations and companies were part of this?
Probably over 20,000 companies all across the entire United States, all 50 states, yes.
How in the heck did that work? How in the heck did the alignment happen? Because this is rocket science.
It is.
And I heard Armstrong say, and he was narrated by Harrison Ford, which was awesome. He did the narration on the movie, but he was saying, like, we're astronauts, and he was a test pilot, which gave him a lot of also access to being the first man, and having that right stuff. But he's like, we don't go on chance. We're not doing this on maybe. Like, this has all been thought out. This has all been tested. This is, to as far as you can go without leaving, the Earth. And he's like, it was kind of making that point. Like, this has to work. Like, we're not going because we think it might work. We know it's going to work.
Yes.
And I really appreciated that. And that was leaning a lot on you and all the other engineers and folks that making this possible. There was a lot of faith. And,
that's right.
To get them there safely. And so I want to know, how in the world does this alignment happen? How did this happen?
Wow. You know what?
And the
the best
communications.
to and the communications let me think to best describe that. um, you've heard, I know you've heard, everybody has heard the word miracle. I
Yeah.
think this was called a technical miracle. There's human miracles. This was a technical miracle. And with everybody actually sacrificing, making huge sacrifices. This was called the divorce capital of the entire world, right here in Brevard County in 66, 67. And there was reason for that. And the, we're out there doing your job. Sometimes you wouldn't be coming home for a day or two. You'd be wrapped up out there. And one of the things I heard the other day in one of the meetings we were having is one guy said he came home for dinner one night. He had been out there, for a day and a half, and he came home from dinner. And his dinner was on the table, and there was a photograph of his children, and his wife had left a message. This is what your children look like. This picture was taken yesterday.
Oh, man.
That was typical, and I was single at the time, and so it worked for me, and I could work there. And sometimes we did 7/12s, and that would almost kill you, even at my age. I was very young, but we worked. It was a 24-hour a day job, and not just for us here trying to get everything prepared and do what we had to do to get ready, but the other 400,000 people. I essentially see them doing the same thing, building these parts, piece parts, millions of parts to put this thing together for the launch vehicle. Millions of parts for the launch vehicle. That's the 3-stage propulsive stage with the IBM 3-ring brain on our forward inner stage there attached. Then you move up from there up into the spacecraft. The spacecraft, we use it as one word and one entity, but the spacecraft, when you referred to it, it was 4 pieces. It was the command module and the service module that was attached, both built by Rockwell, North American Aviation, and eventually Rockwell. And then the 2-stage lunar module, lunar lander that was going to land on the moon. There was 2 major pieces of that. The descent stage that would be landing on the moon, that had a throttleable engine from 1,000 to about 10,000 K, where the commander or pilot could actually adjust the thrust and land anywhere they wanted, but have control over hovering, moving sideways, whatever. And then you had the upper stage, the ascent stage. We're talking another few million parts here. And we're talking the spacecraft. You have the few million down here in the launch vehicle. You had a few more million up here in the spacecraft. And that's how you separate the two. When you hear people talk about the spacecraft, they're talking about a four-piece entity there. And of which there's only one piece that comes back. And that's the command module, a little tiny triangle thing with 3 people in it. Everything else is thrown away, and very expensive hardware, dropping in the ocean, the first stage, second stage, and our stage either crashing on the moon. A lot of people don't know that, but during the Apollo program, they had some seismometers that they'd left up there on Apollo 11 and 12, and they weren't sure that they were working, and they said, somebody said, Apollo 13, why don't we take our S4B, instead of letting it shoot by the moon and go into orbit around the sun and being slingshotted out, why don't we just impact them on the moon and our stage, S4B? And lo and behold, Apollo 13, the ill-fated 13, was a successful, what they call them, a successful failure. That's a good term for it, because that was NASA's finest moment, saving those guys. But anyway, our stage impacted the moon on that mission, and that was just the beginning. There were 4 more. And there's 4 S4Bs on the moon that impacted on the moon. And lo and behold, those seismometers that were left up there that were supposed to detect moonquakes, and they were just checking them out. Lo and behold, they would see those spikes on those seismometers. They work. They work. And they saw 5 of our S4Bs, and they're up there to this day. But it was a very, that program, you spent a lot of money. There was a lot of waste. I think the total sum back in $1960, $60 and $70 was about 25 mil for us to get to the moon. And but it was 25, not mil. It's B with a bill. It's billion, not million. It's 25 billion back in those days. That would be 100 or 125 billion today in today's dollars. But it was to beat an adversary. And one of the things that I would like to debunk now, and I even find myself falling prey to it, because when I'm talking, sometimes I say it's a shame that Kennedy was not around to realize, and then you say dream, or you say vision. No, it was not a dream of his, and it was not a vision of his. The word is obsession. His obsession was, the Russians have made us look like fools. We were preeminent in everything, you know, innovations and so forth. We were usually the country. We were looking very sad. He had an obsession, and that obsession was to beat them to the moon. And we did win that race. So I have to catch myself now, because I still sometimes say it's a shame he wasn't around to see his dream come true, to see his obsession come true, because we really did something there. We beat the Russians. We put our flag on the moon. They didn't get to put their flag. There's still no flag up there. There's 6 American flags up there. One of them is tilted over because Buzz Aldrin said when we blasted off, we saw our flag flip over and go down. But the other, there's still 6 of them up there, and it's our country. It's our flag. Our flag is pretty much under attack today, but there's a heck of a lot of people that have died for that flag. The greatest generation and many, many others from other wars, unwinnable. But our flag, we were able to meet his obsession in the time element that he said, let's try and do it. And the words that he said, not because it's easy, because it's hard. Those were his words. Yeah. And it was very hard. But we did it, and so that's my, you know, my final analysis of where we are and what we did, and but I did want to, and here again, it's me talking. But if people go do research, you will to choose. Oh, it was JFK's vision, his dream. No, go do your research. It was an obsession, and we won the race.
Oh. Well said. I want to throw, we have a few minutes here left, and I wanted to make sure we got some questions in. There's a few questions here. James, Smokemaster James asked this question, but I think you've answered it already. And Smokemaster James, we both know, is my brother, your son. So, yeah, he said, you know, he was just wondering if you could describe the feelings of being a part of one of the greatest moments in our USA history. And I think you've done that. So, if you want to add like 1 word or 2 words to that we can do that. But there's some other questions too I want to get to as well.
Yes, fisherman's son. The greatest, for lack of words, the greatest event and feeling in my lifetime, and how fortunate I was there to be part of it, as so many others, and they would second my emotion, I'm sure. And I have to go back to exhilaration, and those feelings. as I've already described, were almost indescribable. Is a good choice of words. I think
Nice word.
that
Yeah.
moment and that feeling of those swing arms breaking away and watching it on our little black TVs and on top of our consoles was indescribable. Almost in words. It just that's, and I'm going to leave it at that. It was indescribable.
Well said. So Jamie says, thanks for sharing your story. What would you like to see as projects like Lunar Gateway get started as the USA prepares to return to lunar missions?
That's a very good question, follow-up, and I'll try and be as quick as I can. I was shocked and dismayed at your cousin's interview with Michael Collins yesterday at the Space Center. Daryl Neal, my sister's son, he had the opportunity to have that one-on-one with him after he had his podcast out at the Pad 39 with Bob Cabana. He came into our firing room, and Daryl got to talk to him very quickly. Toward the end of it, he's a very it's out there on the internet, that interview, but he is a very colorful guy, but one of the things that just amazed me and blew me away was, hey, Jeff Bezos says, we ought to go to the moon first before we go to the Mars. And my opinion is, yes, we should. I am in totally agreement with that. You go back to the moon. It's a hostile environment. It's very similar to, there's hardly any atmosphere on Mars. You learn how to live in that for long periods of time. You colonize it with this guy Bigelow Aerospace from Las Vegas. He's building these things that you can live in, that you can take them up and expand them on the moon. Build the gateway, the lunar orbiting vehicle that would be the command center for everything going on the moon and so forth. Learn to live there. Learn what the materials are there. If there's water there, you could possibly potentially make fuels, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, which are high energy fuels that we use. A lot of things by practicing. In other words, it's a gateway. I like that word. It's a gateway to Mars. Then you go to Mars. It's a 3-day mission to the moon. It's 9 months to Mars right now, unless you can keep pushing and keep accelerating. And I think that's what Elon Musk says. I think I could shave 3 months off of that. But when you're talking about people being cooped up with the things that you have to provide for their livelihood, and it's called the environmental control system, and food and air to breathe and waste management and so forth, for 9 months. Okay, that's one way going out. Hey, you want to come back? That's another 9 months. You want to spin around there for a few days. So the logistics of the moon, going to Mars, I'm not saying they will not be eventually overcome, but the logistics of going to Mars compared to the logistics going back to the moon, setting up shop, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think it would you'd almost be mandatorily required to get other nations to help you with that. So I was shocked by what Michael Collins said. Let's go directly to Mars. I don't believe in what Bezos says. Well, I do. So there's two factions going on right now, and there is some there is some controversy because they just got an extra 1.6 billion for the budget to start accelerating this, because not only on top of the regular budget that NASA would get to do this by 2024, that budget would have to be expanded, almost doubled, for us to accomplish that landing getting back to the moon. Tremendous amount of extra dollars, dinero, that the Congress would have to be approving, and the American people, you have to get them behind it again. So those are the two big things, but I wanted to address that because that interview we saw this morning with Daryl, your cousin, with him, shocked me a little bit. It shocked me, but he is entitled to his opinion, and maybe he's right, and maybe Bezos is right, but time will tell. as we shall say. I like to use Trumpisms every now and then. Let's see what happens. End it with that.
All right. All right. Awesome. Well, great answer. And there's two more questions here, and they're
Okay.
both from James Mitchell. And James is a part of the User Defenders community. So thanks, James, for being here. Thanks everybody for being here. But these are some interesting questions that he has. What are your thoughts on the new space technology, such as the SpaceX reusable boosters?
Oh, wow. That's another very good question. I never thought in my lifetime ever that I would see a booster coming back down from space and very gently settling on Cape Canaveral over here on what they call landing zone 1 that the Air Force is allowing Musk to use for his landing site. Never in my wildest dreams. As it had been talked about reusability and so forth, we use that word to get the shuttle program financed by our government. Reusability. Oh, we'll drive the prices down. It didn't work. It's still $400 or $500 million for a shuttle mission, at least 400 mil. But so that reusability. This guy Musk, I have to say, is somewhat of a genius, and what he has done and done so quickly, to watch one of those things come down, screaming down from several thousand miles an hour, coming down, seeing the engines, 3 of those 9 flash on there for the slowdown, and then come on again just before the legs pop out on it, and it gently lands very softly, almost within feet of this cross on our Earth here. Is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, and I did get the opportunity. Happened to volunteer that day out there to watch the big, what they call the BFR, which was his 3 booster stages strapped together, 27 engines having to go off for almost 500 million pounds of 5 million pounds of thrust. I'm sorry, as compared to it's still not the 7.5 million of the Sat-5, but it was horrendous and impressive. And to watch 2 of these things coming down simultaneously, and when they come down, you count about 8 or 9 seconds, and boom, you get the sonic booms, and there's boom, boom, and it makes you get chill bumps. And every time he sticks one of those, he's saving about $60 million. That's going to be passed on to future users. He's trying to recompense what he's put out there for developing this technique, but it's going to be cheaper and cheaper. And the fact that he and I think even Jeff Bezos, Musk and Bezos, are partners with NASA. And it's starting to work, and it's starting to work very well. And NASA, they can go to them and say, how about doing this for this and doing this for that? We'll write you a check. Get on it. And these companies can do it cheaper. We're calling it commercial space now. Private people are in it, and it's the greatest thing that ever happened down here. And let me tell you, Kennedy Space Center is going to be booming. It's starting to boom. Bezos, we just went out there yesterday, right next to his huge building that he is building to build his rockets in, and he's already started to build them. He's going to be a big name here, and we're all so thankful that he chose this place to build his rocket. We're right next door. They have cleared out about another 80 acres. I don't know what's going up there, but something is, and it's very, very close to the Visitors Information Center. You put in a plug for the Visitors Information Center. If you come to Florida, I think one of the most bangs for your buck is that 50 or 60 bucks to take that bus tour of what your tax dollars have done down here, and to go in, and all part of the tour of the massive museum where I volunteer as a docent. I had to look up what that meant. It means being a volunteer, to spend your money, because you can spend all day there and you will be in awe of what you will see for that $60 bill for adults. Much cheaper. Kids under 3 are 0. But anyway, wanted to put in that plug for the NASA center that provides these bus tours that are tremendous. You took it yourself.
All right, loved it. Unforgettable, and And my dad will be there. And you're there. Is it the second Tuesday or?
No, first and third Tuesdays of every month. Been doing that for 8 years. I've learned a lot and learned how to respond to these foreigners. A lot of the people from foreign countries come in shaking their head in awe. They cannot believe the gigantic, the monsters, this monster vehicle, and how we did it. And so that's why I'm there. A lot of us are there, many of us, not just me, to explain and answer their questions. Loved it.
That's awesome. So yeah, you might get to visit my pop if you go out there. You might see him there. So yeah,
look forward to seeing you, and introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I know Jason." That's all you got to do.
That's awesome. So this is the last question, and thanks everybody for sticking around past our time. But this one's from James Mitchell as well, and I really like this as kind of an end question. What was your greatest lesson in all your years working with NASA?
The greatest lesson working with NASA is having the opportunity to work on two colossal programs. The Apollo program, I was there for every one of those Apollo moon missions and landings, and I was there for every shuttle mission, all 135, and the pink slip man finally got me, but when I walked out the door, I walked out with 8,000 other fantastic people. I was lucky enough, I'd hit 51 years, I could retire. Those people, unfortunately, they had to go find other jobs and so forth. They had car payments, house payments, kids in school, whatever. But anyway, working those two programs and having the opportunity, and you're learning something. If you're not learning something almost every day when you go out there, I mean, you're backing up. I learned so much, and there was so much to learn, and it expands my everyday life was expanded by just being out there on those two huge programs. But now those huge programs are so no longer, hey, huge program over, go by. We've got the commercial people out there working with NASA, and so it's going to continue. Anybody working out there is going to have the same feelings. Hey, man, you can't wait to get up in the morning and get out there and learn something new, or be able to contribute to what you have already learned toward whatever you're doing out there. You're waking up every day. It wasn't exciting. It was not boring at all for the last 51 years. And I am so lucky. And I use the word luck. I am so blessed. Again, I will say it again, to have had that opportunity. And I hope I answered your questions, because it was a good question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dad, so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to close, and I'll tell you too that there's a lot of gratitude in the chat. A lot of people saying thank you so much. This has been fantastic, epic. Thank you for sharing your experiences at such an amazing time in our history. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences, Mr. Ogle, and for giving us an insider's perspective on such a historic moment. Very cool. So just some amazing, and this was amazing. Thank you, sir. It was an honor. So just a lot of gratitude in the chat right now. And I want to kind of throw one last love bomb on this before we go here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the words of Neil Armstrong. And this was in his last transmission from space. This is the Apollo 11 mission that we're celebrating and that you were a part of. In the last transmission from space before reentry, you, Father, you, my dad, you got a personal message and a personal thank you from the first man, Neil Armstrong himself. And I want to echo it. I'm going to read it. And this one's for you, Dad, and the 399,999 others who made the impossible possible. This is what Neil Armstrong said. He said, "We'd like to give a special thanks to all those Americans who built those spacecraft, who did the construction, designed the test, and put their hearts and all their abilities into those crafts. To those people tonight, we give a special thank you. And to all the other people that are listening and watching tonight, God bless you. Good night from Apollo 11.
Holy mackerel. I don't remember those words, but that is a tremendous tribute from a fantastic person. Very proud of that. There's one comment I want to say real quick.
Yeah, please.
Part of, and then we'll wrap it. But one of the comments that I never heard or I couldn't remember was from President Kennedy in his speech. It says, when the late President Kennedy proposed the lunar landing program, he observed in a very real sense, it will not be one man going to the moon. It will be an entire nation. And for all of us must work to put him there. Those were some fantastic, powerful words. I was reading this the other day and I said, holy mackerel, he said that. It's not just putting one man, but the entire world is a part of this. And that was great.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Man. Hey, thank you.
I'm so glad you shared that, Pop. And you know what? I think just kind of piggybacking on that sentiment, I feel like you said this in our time. There's never been another event that has really brought not only our country but the world together, I think, in celebration of this achievement. And I think, you know, with just all the tension and all the arguments and disagreement and all the unrest, and not only our nation but in our world, I feel like we need another Apollo 11 mission. We need something to bring our world and our fellow human beings together again. So I feel like there's still hope, and of course we know
there is.
There's still hope. There's a world beyond this one too for all of us that we have access to if we only believe. So I just thank you, Dad. Thank you for your time here today. Thank you for sharing your experience, your UX, as I say, your user experience of being a part of this. And thanks everyone for sticking around for this and also asking the great questions. So I'll just close by saying, as always, Dad, I just want to say, fight on.
And I want to say to your panelists, thank you for listening to my story. As I told somebody the other day, I don't plan on going to the 100th anniversary. It took a few seconds for those people to understand what I meant, but this is the last hurrah for a lot of us, and we're so excited about having the opportunity to tell our stories. And I want to thank all of your panelists for checking in with you, Jason, and listening to me. It gives me a great honor and privilege to be able to do that. And thank you all so much for listening.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dad. All right.
10-4, man.
10-4, roger that. And over and out, good buddy.
Okay, say back at you, son. Right. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye now.
Moon mission, moving on up. Let's see how high she goes, boys. Moon mission, fuel her on up and let's get the hell out of this noise. Black distance, silent as time. Tell me, how far does it go? Buckle me in and I see for myself and report to you folks down below.